Hey folks, Paul Essery here, and I'm delighted this morning to be with Michael Donald from ImageNPay. Michael, thank you for taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat with us, because you've got quite a different proposition. So I'm quite looking forward to hearing the story about it. So, like I say, thank you for giving us a bit of time. I mean, just for the folks that will be listening or watching, I mean, tell us a bit about yourself and then a bit about the business, and then we'll kind of talk about the tech and what it does in a second. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So am 62 this year. So running a startup at the other end of my life, having worked for big corporates most of my life, brands like American Express, IKEA, Bank of America. And I'm the father of three. I've got two teenage kids, and I've got a 19-month-old. So lots of things to keep me busy, and generally wanted to look at all of the things that I'd come across over the years from a banking or financial services perspective, and develop something that was, as you said in the intro, a little bit different, which could actually, create, major benefits for young people and adults alike as you move into the future.
Cool. And tell us about the ImageNPay business. I mean, just roughly what that does, and then we'll talk about
So
the
the
tech.
ImageNPay business, it's threefold, but it's basically it's an image-based digital payment platform. So think of gaming. If you could pay with a Fortnite character or a Roblox character or your favorite football player, it's creating a payment platform that's completely digital, zero plastic, zero paper,
Yeah.
To get consumers closer to the things they love, the brands they love, the entertainment, the movies, the things they love, and actually create digital imagery that they can pay with, and benefit from a loyalty perspective. So, if you paid with the Batman, for instance, in Starbucks, 5 times, does Batman win you a free muffin? It's creating things which are much more the emotional quotient, and giving the consumer the ability to probably opt out of those horrible things that we all see on Google, where you look at a pair of trainers and they follow you around the internet for 4 weeks, whether you bought them or not.
Yeah, yeah. It's absurd, isn't it? So, I mean, I think it's a really, really interesting proposition that you come up with. So, I mean, tell us a bit about the tech, but more importantly, tell us why that imagery and tell us why that's important and what it enables people to do and how that changes things, because that's the thing I think that is particularly exciting about this.
Yeah, so essentially, it probably will sound really simple, but in fact, it's hugely complicated. So the payments ecosystem, which is something I've been working in for over 30 years now, is incredibly complex. And the only way I can describe it, for people watching this or listening to this, is back in the old days, you had a physical piece of plastic, and you pull it out, and they put it in one of these machines that we all used to call a click clack machine, and they drive it forward, and it would go click clack, and they give you a piece of paper with 3 carbons, and you'd sign it, and it would all go off to different places. No authorization. Maybe you'd pick up the phone to check whether that person was really that person, and that was how it worked. And then they started moving it forward to point of sale, which was magnetic stripe, and you could sign it. Lots of people in the US used to sign it Mickey Mouse, and nobody ever looked at it. Then you move fast forward to what we all know as and love as chip and pin, to then contactless. And contactless was 15, 20 quid when it was first introduced, and then it's moved to 100. So you think we've gone from click, clack, 1 week later the transaction gets processed, to that quick. And consumers expect things to happen that quickly. Whereas in the background, there is still a vast amount of legacy technology making that happen, even though in reality it's still click clack. So there's a lot of things going on. So what we decided to do was do something completely different, and create a payment application where, first and foremost, the mission vision is to never issue plastic. Now, other brands do that. They don't necessarily have to issue plastic. There is a big cost to the planet, and to the P&L, but we wanted to develop an image-based payment platform where you could go into App Store, download the app from App Store or Play Store, and we'll come on to why the tech is so complicated in a minute. Download it, put in your details, self-identify, have a digital card imaged, a digital card issued within 3 minutes, and then go on to pay in shops using Apple Pay or Google Pay. Sounds a bit like Revolut, except and here is the big challenge, and this is why the tech is so different. on most of these platforms that you see around the world, and I'll give an example, and they won't mind me doing this, but as I used to be a Visa board member, but if you look at some of the Visa programs with Barclaycard, for instance, you can have a picture of your dog, and you can take that card, and it goes off to New Zealand to be approved, and it comes back, and then you get a card with your dog on it on a piece of plastic. When you put that card into an iPhone or an Android phone, it just says Barclaycard. So that whole USP of trying to get the consumer closer, make them feel more loved, when they get their card out, it's got a picture of their dog on. Well, the minute they put it in the phone, the whole customer journey is broken. So we wanted to do something completely different. And this is probably the secret sauce and why it was so difficult and took so long. The big idea was to sort of take what a Minecraft do or a gaming platform and create a skin essentially for a blank product. And the big idea was if we could create the ability for consumers to choose from a preset number of different cards with images, that image could be instantly deployed into their phone in our digital wallet. And when they change the image in the wallet, depending on their mood or depending on the loyalty or the offer, it immediately pops in their iPhone or their Android phone. Now, that sounds simple, but in order to do that, you have to build with iOS and Apple. Every single release, every single wireframe has to be approved. You then have to do the identical thing with Google. You then have to interact with MasterCard on a global level through their authorization system to make sure those images are not breaching of what we call in the industry the scheme rules. So no nudity, no alcohol, no cigarettes, no weapons, things like that. So you have to be incredibly careful. And then you give the consumer a suite of images within our application for them to choose from. Now, that all sounds very easy, but the big idea was if you can create interactive charity images, for instance, and within our app, we've also built an interactive media screen, so media and content screen. So we have David Attenborough talking about, while saving the world is so important, with dolphins leaping through the media screen. But when you touch the screen, it's interactive. It drops you down to cards that we've developed in association with the World Wildlife Fund, completely digitally. And you can then apply those cards as your payment card. And of course, when you pay for your cup of coffee, the tiger comes up, or an elephant comes up. But what we've done to take it that much further, we thought, well, this is okay. Well, actually, it wasn't my idea. My son, when he was 12, said, well, this is okay, Dad, but it doesn't move. And our programmers went, what do you mean, Alexander? He said, well, it's static. Can I have a moving image on a payment card? Wow. 12 months later, and about £250,000, we managed to do it. So within I think during COVID, actually, we worked on that one. And the first moving image ever deployed on a payment card globally from our little old company in the UK was dolphins leaping through the water. Through a payment card.
I mean, what a lot of people won't understand why that matters to people. I mean, just talk about why does that make a difference to consumers, to users? Why are those things? What sort of impact do they have? Why does that matter to people? Just tell us a bit about that, because I think a lot of people will think, well, why does that matter?
Exactly, and that's a very good point. A lot of people have said that to us. Why does it matter? And there's just two issues from an ecosystem perspective. So I'll come back to how everybody talks about big data in a minute. And we've all been hearing people talk about big data forever. Now it's AI and big data. Generally, currently, it's all rubbish. Don't believe what you hear, folks, because humans haven't even got their head around big data yet. But the reason it is so important, and whilst we felt it was so important, the initial idea was not ImageNPay. The initial idea was creating a digital platform as software as a service, like the Intel Inside, that enabled banks to go 100% digital, using imagery which their existing customers may have an affinity with. And you think of those old affinity card programs, the Manchester United card, the Chelsea card, the World Wildlife Fund card. Those cards were developed on plastic to allow people to be closer to those brands, and actually they would use that card more often. If they were a Man United supporter, they would use it more often to pay for things that they love because they love the club. Now, that's all well and good, but on a global basis, and this is a really important statistic, and I would urge everyone who watches this podcast just to look it up. There are 24 billion debit and credit cards in issue globally. That's forecast to rise to 30 billion in the next 5 years. That is an insane number. It's more insane when you think that banks in general reissue a third of those cards every year because they're on a 3-year reissue at a cost, wait for it, at about $10 a card. So that is $80 billion plus a year being spent to reissue plastic to an audience who has a smartphone. That is Einstein's, dynamic of insanity. I mean, it is insane. And you look at the cost and you look at the opportunity, that £10 to issue could be reissued to the consumer as a carbon credit. So I felt personally partly responsible, having been in payments all my life with some big brands like American Express on the border Visa, that there has to be a better way. And everyone talks about the phone being a better way, but there is fundamentally a breakdown of trust between the consumer and banks, we know, and then suspicion around technology. Who's watching? Can someone really get that transaction from my phone? So you've got this perfect storm of banks greenwashing, going, hey, we're issuing recycled plastic. Amazing. That's fantastic. Does anyone ever check that it's recycled? I don't know. Most of it comes from China. The carbon footprint is minutely different to the existing plastic already in circulation. So going to recycled plastic does nothing for the carbon footprint. And the key thing is, if you can move digital and if you can get consumers to pay with something they love and change that image when they want to, then that really provides, a hook for the consumer to say, yeah, I get it. I want to go plastic free. More importantly, and the reason we then pivoted to ImageNPay is, we were stuck in COVID. We were about to launch for a big bank. We couldn't deploy because it was in another country. So we thought, well, why not create our own brand? Which again, I take no credit for the name. My son came up with the name ImageNPay ages ago, like rock and roll, like mac and cheese. It's linking the image to the payment. And the big idea there was, if we can launch a prepaid application where it's not credit, so it doesn't push people further into debt, it means most people can be approved for a card. It can support charities. It can support entertainment, artists, sport. And then, as we started to build it, and it was a very, very complex process with Apple to get that first image to change. Even more complex with Google. And lovely people at Google, I do love you, but you have broken it 3 times, but you do keep fixing it. And Google came back to us and said, well, you're the only people in the world that are using the platform for this. Why? So Google asked the same question that you just asked. Why? What's the importance behind the imagery? And what we felt was, big sporting brands, you could create your own digital football team, and you pay with one player versus another. And that gives you a completely fresh data point. So if I'm paying with Ronaldo versus Messi, I might see that people who pay with Ronaldo pay more times in Starbucks than in Costa. Can we reward those consumers for paying with Ronaldo? Absolutely. Will Ronaldo want a cut? Absolutely. But can we create a better ecosystem? Coming back to that point about big data, what usually happens in the cards business today, and it has been happening for years, you pay with the card, and at the end of the month, they send you a statement. It tells you what you spent on, and they try and encourage you to spend on something else that either you've already spent on or that they think or guess you might want to buy. We don't do that. We look at the image you use in real time, and we say, do you know what? If you just use Messi to buy a Costa, we're not going to ask you to use Messi to buy another Costa. We're going to ask you to maybe use Messi to buy something from Adidas because he's the Adidas ambassador. It's a very simple way of saying, by deploying this image, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, or kids, you've said you have a propensity, you like Fortnite. So actually, why don't we give you an offer from Fortnite? And it's highly complex, but essentially it's that simple. It's giving people a better way to use their, very, very pressured, net disposable income on things they love at better value.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very interesting proposition, I have to say. I mean, it can't have been easy to get to where you've got to. I mean, I get the sense it's been a bit of a journey. I mean, tell us about some of the challenges that you've had to overcome to get to where you are currently.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably one of the most intricate things is, so in all these things, you have to, the primary thing that you must do for all of you out there that are thinking of starting a bank, see money licenses, all these things. You have to safeguard the consumer. The consumer is paramount. You have to safeguard their funds, and you need to make sure, probably one of the most difficult things was choosing the right supplier who has an e-money license. Now, Monzo have gone that route. Revolut did that as well at the beginning. They sit on someone else's rails, and that was first and foremost probably our biggest challenge. And we had to find the right supplier. However, that challenge was made even bigger that as we were 4 months into COVID when we were having to go through that process, so there were no face-to-face meetings. You were literally sitting on video, like I'm sitting with you now, trying to gauge, do I trust this organization? Because, can I see, I can see the whites of the eyes, but, there was no substitute for being in the same room. Then once we were going through that process, we already had a global organization called EPAM, who are a NASDAQ listed company, probably best in class at developing these things. But they were all then in different countries, or basically in their bedrooms, or hiding from their kids in their toilets on their laptops by trying to program something that had never been done before. So that aside, we then had to engage Apple, who are wonderful at what Apple do, but sometimes they're just, as we all know, they're just Apple. It's like, Michael, it happens this way. And so we had to then build the parameters with Apple whilst at the same time engaging with MasterCard to build something which nobody had ever done before. And even Apple, when I used to work for Bank of America, said, really interesting, really challenging. I'm not sure whether it will actually work. Like all these things, I'm not sure it will actually work. And that was the biggest challenge, was probably the psychological dynamic of me being on my own most of the time through COVID, developing with people who are all also alone technically, in their houses, trying to develop something that had never been done before, with a lot of people saying, don't know why you're doing it. Don't think it can be done. So that was probably, with all the other challenges were, physical, technical, which were, hugely difficult. Lots of time spent whiteboarding things out and, snapping it with a phone, snapping the picture and sending it to the programmers. But probably the most difficult thing to cope with during that period, we had 18 months, 2 years of lockdown, trying to build in isolation with other people who were in isolation. And I think, probably all credit to everyone. The thing we probably did best was making sure everybody was checking in with everybody all the time, to make sure that, literally you could pick up the phone to anyone at any time to see how they were doing, how they were feeling, because nobody had ever done this in isolation before. And I think, all of those things together probably made this one of the hardest things I've probably ever done in my career.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. I mean, and hugely complicated. I mean, a hugely complex project delivered in very difficult circumstances. So well done on that. I mean, I'm impressed. I mean, in terms of the future, though, I mean, I know you've got big ambitions and you've got a bit of a way to, you've got a bit of a way to go to achieve those. I mean, tell us a little bit about the kind of medium to long term. How do you see things playing out over the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, what are your ambitions for the company? What's the direction of travel?
So the big ambition would be, and I'll hit the vision statement before we get to the end and then come back to some of the other things. The big ambition would be to try and remove 25% to 50% of those 24 billion bits of plastic. Yeah. I mean, literally, for a bank to develop, we've spent quite a few millions on this, but for a bank to develop what we have developed, it would probably cost them between 7 to 10 million. And they wouldn't share it with anyone because banks aren't sharing and caring with each other. So we've built a platform that any bank can take and use that software as a service under license. So they can fast track their consumers to a place where they can have image changing as a service and start to remove the plastic. The vision for me would be twofold. We start to roll out ImageNPay into other markets and on a joint venture or franchise basis, using that name on the boilerplate, ImageNPay. We believe, and we've had some very interesting feedback from organizations like NASCAR and the NFL in the US, that this is a US platform. Mac and cheese, rock and roll, ImageNPay. We get it. When can you come? It's not that easy because Apple might be Apple, but it's then Apple US, it's Google US.
Yeah.
The other dynamics are, can we start to, within our application, and every week on Instagram, my very talented team, Emily Friday leads this financial education, financial inclusion. Why we prepaid. To be financially inclusive is not peddling credit. You have to have more people using prepaid applications which keep their debit card away from the internet. Literally 2/3 of people or 3/4 of people will pay with a debit card because they don't like credit. Mm-hmm. But brands, as we know, car parks everywhere want you to be online and put your card into an application. That, from a debit card perspective, is quite dangerous. We believe that if you've got a prepaid digital card, you load that card just when you want to load it to spend on what you want to. And we have also built in this wonderful thing that nobody really understands called open banking, where you just click, load from your bank, zero plastic. So the vision would be to start to develop more broad-based financial education programs in association with MasterCard, Visa, Apple for young consumers and consumers everywhere. We have ImageNPay Family that we built over the past 18 months, which means any parent can have up to 3 kids with a digital-only card, with all sorts of money matters, spending, education, a bit like GoHenry, but no plastic. And actually, we allow you to change your image whenever you want to. We don't charge you for it. It's just part of the service to enable kids to become more familiar. And finally, how are we going to make a dent in those 24 billion bits of plastic? Because consumers are a bit intransigent. The tech's there. The banks don't really want to use the tech because why change? Because people take plastic. And the big idea here is if you can use the entertainment factor, the football factor, the cricket in India factor, if you use sport, which has huge scale, and you can create your favorite football team, with my club's Chelsea, for instance, it might be Peter Osgood, from the 60s. It might be Zola, from the 90s. But create imagery which enables consumers to feel closer to the brands they love. But in essence, then how do you scale? And a couple of people said, okay, what's the big idea? And I said, well, okay, play on words. What about Swift Pay or Pay Swift? Taylor Swift is moving the demographics of states in America. If Taylor Swift was to say, "Hey, Michael, can I have Pay Swift with my brand?" Absolutely. It will cost you, and I know it will cost me dearly. But you could create an album cover which is a digital Mastercard or Visa card, and if you look at not just the star power that she has, but the influence on her younger fans, she's a really good role model. There's someone like her talking about, this is not just about the payment, people. This is about how do we save the planet? If you've downloaded Swift Pay or Pay Swift 10 million times, 20 million times, that's 20 million bits of plastic that's gone. Now you think if Taylor Swift challenges Ryan Reynolds or Leonardo to go to their fan base, or challenges the whole of the NFL, what you suddenly then have is real cause-related education, which leads to better outcomes, which potentially, can help banks and other organizations remove as much plastic from the ecosystem as possible. That would be the big vision.
I mean, and I love to see a bit of ambition, and I think you've bitten off a nice big challenge there. So good luck with that, And I think it's a tremendously exciting proposition that could open all sorts of interesting doors. So, good luck with that. It would be really interesting to see how it plays out. And if we can get rid of a load of plastic, so much the better. That's better for everybody, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
Michael, thank you for coming and telling the story. Thank you for making a bit of time for us because it's really, really interesting. And like I say, good luck, and perhaps come back in a year or two and let us know how you're getting on.
Well, yeah, and if anyone wants to go, we're on App Store, Play Store, and actually, we also, just one last thing to leave you with. Last year, we thought with all the recession that's been going on, we've put in try before you buy, so people can go in, play with it, see what they like it without even having to, take a card. Just go play. Have a look, see if it's for you. And thank you very much for inviting me on, Paul.
No worries. See you soon. Cheers, Michael.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.